Imagine this. A young American man, barely out of his teens, packs his bags, leaves everything he knows behind, and moves to Japan. Not for a vacation, not for a semester abroad. For good. He learns the language. He masters the art. He falls in love. He builds a family. And then Hollywood comes calling. What happens to the woman he leaves behind? The woman who gave him a home, a family, and a future he eventually walked away from. That story has almost never been told. Her name is Miyako Fujitani, and unlike the man she once called her husband, she never wanted to be famous. The question is, did life give her peace, or did it give her pain? Stay with us, because the answer is more powerful than anything Steven Seagal ever put on screen. If you were alive in the early 1990s, you already know the image. The black clothing, the long dark ponytail, the eyes that looked permanently unimpressed by whatever threat was walking toward him. Steven Seagal did not audition his way into Hollywood. He arrived, and he arrived like someone who had absolutely nothing to prove. His 1988 debut in Above the Law turned heads immediately. Here was an action star who moved differently, slower somehow, more deliberate, less theatrical. The punches looked real because in training critics were skeptical, but audiences were not hard to kill, marked for death. Out for justice, under siege, hit after hit after hit. By the early 1990s, he was standing shoulder to shoulder with Schwarzenegger and Stallone as one of the defining action stars of his generation. But what made Seagal genuinely interesting and genuinely mysterious was the story he carried before Hollywood ever found him. He didn't build his identity in a gym in Los Angeles or on a film set in New York. He built it in Japan, in a dojo, in a culture that was not his own, and in that culture, he left something behind that no box office number could ever account for. It is the early 1970s. Steven Seagal is a teenager from Lansing, Michigan, restless, driven, and already deeply serious about martial arts. At an age when most American kids are figuring out who they are, Seagal does something almost no one around him would have predicted. He moves to Japan, he settles in Osaka, he studies aikido with the kind of commitment that impresses people who have spent their entire lives in the art. He is not there to dabble, he is there to belong. And slowly, remarkably, he begins to. He learns Japanese. He absorbs the culture. He earns respect inside circles that do not give it easily to outsiders. And it is inside one of those circles, inside a traditional Aikido dojo run by a well-respected master named Fumio Fujitani, that he meets her, Miyako Fujitani, the master's daughter. Educated, graceful, rooted in a tradition her family had sustained for generations. She is not starstruck. She has nothing to be starstruck by. He is simply a serious young American who has earned his place in her world. They fall in love the way people fall in love when there are no cameras, no publicists, and no public image to manage. Genuinely, quietly in 1975, they marry. Think about that for a moment. Steven Seagal, the man who would one day be one of the most recognizable action stars on the planet, is in his mid-20s, living in Osaka, teaching Aikido in his father-in-law's dojo, raising a family. There are no film deals on the horizon, no red carpets, no limousines, just a life. A real, honest, ordinary life that he chose. When Steven Seagal exploded onto movie screens in 1988, the press did what the press always does. It went digging, and what they found genuinely surprised people. This polished, powerful Hollywood action hero had a whole other life. A Japanese ex-wife, children he'd had in Osaka. A chapter of his story that felt less like a movie and more like something out of a literary novel. Entertainment reporters treated it as a curiosity. Fans found it fascinating. Some found it humanizing, proof that beneath the leather jacket and the unblinking stare was someone complex, someone layered. Others, inevitably, started asking harder questions. He had left Japan. He had left the marriage. He had moved to Los Angeles, launched a film career, and was already in a new relationship with actress Kelly LeBrock, whom he would marry in 1987. The timeline created a natural tension. The mythology of the disciplined spiritual warrior sat uncomfortably, alongside the reality of a man who had walked away from his first family. But Miyako Fujitani said nothing. She gave no interviews. She made no phone calls to tabloids. She did not appear on a single talk show couch to share her side of the story in a media environment that was already hungry for exactly that kind of access. She offered none, and that silence in its own way said everything. During the years they were together, Miyako and Steven built something that, from the outside, looked genuinely stable. They had 2 children, a son, Kentaro, and a daughter, Ayako. They were embedded in the Fujitani family's world, with the dojo as the center of their daily life. Seagal was not just a son-in-law. He was an instructor. He taught, He trained. He carried real responsibility within a community that had welcomed him. For a man who would later be known for one of the most turbulent and controversial personal lives in Hollywood, this chapter is striking in its ordinariness. He had a home, he had a family, he had a purpose that existed completely outside of fame. But ambition does not sit still. Connections began forming that would eventually pull Seagal westward, toward Los Angeles, toward the film industry, toward a version of himself that would make him globally famous. The distance between that version and the quiet man in the Osaka dojo grew wider with every passing year. By 1981, the marriage was over. The divorce was finalized before a single frame of his first movie had ever been filmed. He left Japan, and Miyako stayed. The years that followed were not kind to Steven Seagal's reputation, and that is an understatement. His marriage to Kelly LeBrock ended in 1996 amid painful public allegations. His film career, which had blazed so brightly through the early 1990s, began its long, slow fade. And then came the wave of misconduct allegations, multiple women, serious accusations, documented accounts that emerged with particular force during the Me Too movement. The action hero mythology collapsed under the weight of it. By the late 2010s, Seagal was living primarily in Russia, having obtained Russian citizenship in 2016, and his standing in American culture had shifted from icon to cautionary tale. Through every single one of those headlines, Miyako Fujitani remained invisible to the press. No statement, no reaction, no attempt to position herself in the narrative. Her restraint was not weakness. It looked, with the benefit of hindsight, like wisdom. Here is the answer to the question this video promised you, and it is in its own way quietly extraordinary. Miyako Fujitani is in Osaka. She never left. She is running the family dojo, the very same one where she first met a young American man who had crossed the Pacific Ocean searching for something worth building his life around. She has spent decades teaching aikido, preserving her family's legacy, and raising her children in the tradition she was born into. Her son Kentaro has pursued acting in Japan with some success. Her daughter Ayako has maintained a similarly private life. Neither has traded on their father's name in any meaningful public way. The values their mother built their upbringing around seem to have taken hold. Miyako is not on Instagram curating a personal brand. She is not appearing on reunion panels or reality television. She is not giving the exclusive interviews that entertainment outlets would absolutely still pay for if she offered them. She is simply living in the same city, in the same tradition, with the same dignity she has carried her entire life. There is a version of Miyako Fujitani's story that could be told as tragedy. Young woman falls for an ambitious foreigner, he gets famous. He leaves, she gets nothing. But that version does not hold up when you look at the facts, because she did not get nothing. She kept her home, she kept her children, she kept her name. She kept her life exactly as she wanted it, on her terms, in her culture, rooted in something that does not rise and fall with a box office report or a press cycle. Steven Seagal became one of the most recognizable faces of an entire decade of American cinema. Miyako Fujitani became someone who teaches Aikido in Osaka and sleeps well at night. Which of those two outcomes represents a life better lived? That is a question each of us has to answer for ourselves. Fame has a cost that the famous rarely admit to until it is too late. And sometimes the wisest thing a person can do is watch someone else pay that price and choose differently. So here is what we want to know from you. Do you think Miyako Fujitani made the right choice by staying completely silent through all of it? And does her story change the way you see Steven Seagal? Not as an action star, but as a person. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one.